Hi everybody, welcome to the Technical Foundations Launch Excel video. So hopefully you have the Excel thing document here, and what I've tried to do to make your life a little bit easier is on this additional sheet here, you kind of have like what we're going to try and do, and this matches the Adobe, very similar sort of the learning. You should be able to hopefully follow along. If you want to take some notes, you can. Note that again, I'm working on a PC. Macs are a little bit different. The big one is when we start moving around and using the data, I do a lot of highlighting using Control and the Shift key at the same time. For the Macs, it's going to be Command and Shift. So Control and Command are interchangeable based on PC or Mac. But don't do it if you're a PC, because that will cause problems. So yeah, like we can kind of just get started. This is meant to kind of, again, help you all just get comfortable. So I might zoom in, a nice feature on Excel, and something I should mention too. Hopefully you have a mouse. This is going to be kind of hard and it's going to be a little bit slow. Your Excel may look a little bit different. So I have my formula bar that I like that's really big. If I go through and click and notice the arrow changes, I can kind of move it up and do something like that. If yours already looks like that, that's perfectly fine. We'll be on the Home tab. And then we have this data, just general company. I always like to think about what data I'm using before. It's the 5,000 fastest growing companies list. It's just a publicly available data set that we kind of played around with and is really nice. It's got some general company information here. It's really ugly. It's got some financial information here, and then this is just an overview tab for us. There's no actual data on there. So let's just kind of go through. So the first piece is really just reviewing the program, assuming you kind of know nothing, or maybe if you've learned it by just playing around in it, I would kind of pay attention. So the most common tab that everyone uses is the Home tab, and most people, if you've worked with Microsoft, like the left where it's like paste, cut, copy, formatting, the font, the alignment, those are pretty universal across most of the Microsoft products. The wrap text merge center is a little bit different. I'll talk about that. And then we've got nice things like we're always working with data, so we have some number formatting. I really like conditional formatting as well, and then some different things that we can do. But I want you to kind of go across. So the tabs are very important because they actually like pop up and leave and come back based upon kind of what we're working with, and you'll see that later on the pivot tables. But yeah, as you just kind of go across, you'll see us kind of navigating a bunch of the different things here. And if you're not familiar with it, it's perfectly fine because we'll be hopefully walking you through each piece, but you can kind of just get a sense of like where we're kind of going to be looking. And again, this updates all the time. So if you're seeing a little bit different, the big thing is please full screen this. It's really, I'm working on 2 screens, but you may not see things. So if you condense or something like that, like note that the buttons will kind of go in and out. It'd be like, I don't see that button. It might be because you're not full screened. I'm working on my small screen, so hopefully you kind of see everything that I see. But if you don't see something, try and full screen it and go from there. We have the data tab we'll work on, review, power pivot. Some of you all may have this, you may not. It's not necessary. We're not going to use it in this one, but it can be useful for more advanced ones. Yeah, the most common thing that I'll use and type in is the formula, or also known, I call it the command bar. It's where we can type commands, or if you're clicking on a cell, it'll show you like what's in there. Most people, if you just learned through trial and error, you probably hate Excel because like what you're clicked, where you're clicked means a lot. And kind of going through there. I can kind of jump into, so I have some hints on terms of like, if I'm typing in a cell, if I hit enter most of the time and I'm not typing, it will automatically go to the next cell. If you like to type things on multiple lines, what you can do is if you first click on a cell, note that nothing happens. You can start typing if you want. If you want to make sure you're typing, you can double click and you'll get the eye cursor, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. And then you can type and you hit enter. And well, what if you want something below that in the same cell? Well, I can just type in there. It doesn't matter where I'm at. If I hold Alt and Enter, it goes to the next line, and we'll go through, and sometimes it'll auto fit it, sometimes it won't, which is kind of really nice. Just a little hint to we going. So let's talk about some basic terminology and some formatting stuff. So and maybe it's just my I don't know, like my odd infatuation with like small details. Like I am a statistics instructor. I like things to look nice. General ways, and later when we're using formulas, this will be a little bit more intuitive or useful. How Excel is set up. So it's set up where all the columns have letters across the top, and then across the side, it's got numbers. So it's going to reference things like battleship. It'll always do letter, then number. So like A7, well, A and then go to 7. So that's how it kind of directionalizes sort of things. Let's see. A general thing I'll see a lot in Excel is things are written over. So note that like it looks like this stops in this cell, but it actually goes across, and a lot of times it doesn't auto fit. What I've seen a lot of people do is the manual way. So notice, and this will be important later when you do cursor shapes. The cursor is very important, and if you're going too fast, you don't even notice it. But you really want to kind of the biggest thing I've found to be successful in Excel is to go slow, right? I would like, I'm the carpenter sort of approach, measure twice, cut once. Instead of just like randomly clicking on 8 different things, like I'm gonna go kind of slow, especially when I'm learning each of the pieces. And so what you could do is go up on the column. First, you'll see it'll turn to like a dark black arrow. If you click it, it'll highlight everything in that column. It's pretty nice when I'm moving data around. But if you want to make a column or a row, so it works on rows as well, wider, note that when you go between a letter, your cursor changes again. And so what you can do is you can click and drag, right? You can kind of change the width however you want. And that's fine, but I don't know what the longest one or the shortest one in here is. So I typically don't. What I'll do is, and sometimes it doesn't work if you have like long things like this URL, you'll see the issue and it causes later, right? You can click on whatever's highlighted and go between, and instead of click and drag, just double click. And then it auto fits to the widest piece. Same thing with rank here. A lot of my students will see the number sign after they do some math, and they're like, oh no, it's broken. When in reality, that's just what Excel does when there's a number and it's not wide enough to show it. So note that I am clicked on that cell, and in my command bar, it tells me, well, the number in there, or formula bar, I should be appropriator, it says, well, the number in there should be 2,923, but you don't see it. It's just because it's not wide enough. So again, I'll go on the side, I'll double click, and it auto fits. You could do that every single time, but again, we're trying to show you how to be efficient. So what I typically do is I highlight it all. So old school, I'll click and drag. I'll click and go drag all the way across. If you're highlighted on all of them, then anywhere in between here, you can double click and it auto fits them all at once. And so I'm going to undo really quick. So I'm on a PC, so I'm going to hold Control and then the letter Z, Max Command Z. You can do from up here, back and forward, but I really like that keyboard shortcut because one, it's faster after I've done it like 5 times, and two, it applies to a lot of programs. So what if I mess something up and that button doesn't exist? I mess things up, honestly, in Outlook all the time, and there isn't an undo button that's really clear. Well, Control Z or Command Z works, and so it works on the Google Sheets and things like that as well. So that's like a universal, like life-saving command. Another way you can select all your data at once is if you go to this top left corner, right, you see kind of this like shaded like gray box. You can click on it and it auto selects all your data. You can also click anywhere in your data and hold Control A or Command A if you're on a Mac. I like this because if I had like blank rows, Control A doesn't work or Command A doesn't work or it stops. And so I'll just do something like that when I'm starting with data and I'll double click and clean it. And same thing, financial information, I'll go over here, click there, and then anywhere in between, double click, and then it auto fits to the widest one, which is really, really, really nice. Yeah, and you can kind of play around with these however you want. I'm not going to use the URL, and I think it spaces things out, so I'm going to make it small because I don't really care. Honestly, you could delete it. I don't generally recommend deleting things because later on you may need them, but for now, it's perfectly fine. Let's see. So kind of going down along, highlighting all the columns on a fit, we did that. And so for revenue, let's show it as a currency or accounting, and then let's mention the rounding buttons. Okay, so anytime I'm working with data that's in sort of a natural sense here, I want to show it in its natural format. And wouldn't you know it, this file already has currency for revenue, so those dollar signs. So if you click on the column, if you undid this, if I changed it, most of the time the data would come looking like this. But if you want it to look clean, a lot of accountants do this a lot, you can change the number format. So on the Home tab, I'm just going to click on the column E, and then you can click either the drop down, or you have a couple standard options. And even if you click on the number sign, so the automatic one is accounting. And so some people really like accounting. It has a dollar sign all the way over here, and then negatives are shown in parentheses. But I honestly, I like currency. I don't know why, it's my brain, my personal preference, but it's entirely up to you. And it will display it. That way it's easy for you later to know like, oh, it's measured in dollars. Note that with currency, and I'm pretty sure with accounting as well, let me quadruple check. Accounting, it will always show to 2 decimals. If for some reason you wanted more, I don't know why you would, up here in the number format, you have this left and right arrow key, and it will round for you. And so note that it doesn't actually round the number in the cell. It's just rounding what it shows you. So like if I went this way, I'm rounding to 0 decimals. If I go this way, I go left. Right, and it'll show me as many as I want it to, and there's no reason to ever do that. But you can kind of do that anytime that you want. I think that'll be more important later. And note that its smallest is to a whole number. Okay, so I'll do that. I'll change it to a currency. And then we talked about rounding. Nice. And again, this is a lot of just like getting things set up the way you want it. If you're really new, I like to like bold my header. So same thing in terms of instead of selecting entire column, I can select entire row. You could click and drag. I hate clicking and dragging, especially if you're working with like 30 variables. Just select the whole because I know there's nothing over there, and then you can click bold. I want the bold. That'll be really nice. And you can do things like italics. Let's see, italics, underline. I have the keyboard shortcuts for all these memorized. In Excel, you'll see if you hover, sometimes it'll tell you. So mine is Control plus B. So I've learned a lot of the keyboard shortcuts through that. I'll try not to use those that heavy through this because that's not really the goal of this, outside the ones that we typically want. Some other things when you're kind of building tables, some people really like borders and highlighting. So I like to fill and use borders. So my kind of standard, and you'll see this a lot, is blue. So I'll like highlight across these. And again, you could click this, maybe you don't want to, but this borders button underneath the font, there's a lot of different options. And when I build tables, it's really nice. This can be really clunky, honestly. I don't use it until after I know I'm done with the table, because if you start copying and pasting things, it can be kind of a pain. But I like to put maybe either a bottom border or maybe a double bottom or a thick border across. And then it just lets me know. If you didn't want it all the way across, you could just undo and then highlight across and then do the bottom border. I don't know why. I like to fill and then do something like that. I just like it. It just makes me, I don't know, it makes it seem a lot nicer. So that's kind of my standard practice. You obviously don't have to do that. So I'm sorry, I use the keyboard shortcut and do something like that. But it's just a nice way, again, to kind of delineate things. Once you do that, the borders don't show as nice, but they are there, which is kind of nice. Okay, cursor shapes. Just different ones. Again, you want to kind of go through, and I will say something early. Your best friend in Excel is escape. Actually, automatically, I certainly showed what I'm going to show you. Like, if you get into something and you start typing, you're like, oh no, that's not what I want to do, or you're freaking out, just hit escape, and it doesn't save anything. It will automatically go back. I'll show you when it's copied and things like that later. That also kind of intimidates people. So for cursor shapes, we've already talked about the ones like, so notice like as I hover over, it changes to a black arrow, whether it's a row or a column. That's just an easy way to select all the data. Again, when you're on the sides, you can do that. If you've ever randomly been clicking, kind of what I did, if you're moving too fast, there's another one in terms of like directional stuff. So if you'll notice, I'm clicked in, I'm going to zoom. So if you've never zoomed in Excel, I use control and then the mouse ball. That kind of helps me. But you can also manually do it kind of down here on the left. And this is pretty universal across all the Microsoft programs. But notice if I'm clicked on this cell, if I go hover a little bit slow towards the bottom border, it changes to an arrow key. And what that is if I'm on the bottom of the cell and I double click, it'll take me all the way to the bottom of my data. So watch, double click, all the way to the bottom. If I'm on the right side of the cell and that pops up, it goes all the way to the right. If I'm at the top, there, go through there, which is really nice. I don't actually use it very often, but I have been confused on times where I'm like, how did that just jump up to the top of the data? And I figured that out a couple of years ago, and it at least helped me there. I don't actually use it because I actually use the keyboard shortcuts for moving around in data, especially if I know that I don't have any blanks or anything. So an easy way to move all the way to the left, right, up, or down in Excel is to hold the control key. So hold control and then use your arrows. So left will go all the way to the left, and then control. And again, you don't have to hit these at the same time. So just hold control and then down arrow key. All the way to the bottom or the first blank. So if you have blanks in your data, so right here is a great one. I didn't even plan this. If I did control down, note that it stops right above the blank. So we do want to always be very careful, and maybe that's the reason why we want to actually click on columns instead of do this, but just showing you. Then control right, control up, control left. If you only want to go left or right one, just hold shift. So if you hold, or not shift, if you just use the arrow key, up, down, left, right, like obviously. Let's see, shift is the equivalent to a highlight and select. So you saw me do it earlier. I'm just kind of clicking around, but instead of holding control, if I hold shift and the right arrow key, it's highlighting everything. And so that means I can copy and paste this if I want. So you can right click and copy. I think it's the most intuitive keyboard shortcut, Control C or Command C if you're a Mac. And then in Excel, when something is copied, you'll see that little rapid bar kind of moving around. A lot of people freak out. They're like, oh no, what's happened? Or something like that. If that bugs you, just hit escape and then it goes away. Note that it's no longer on what we call the clipboard. So you'll have to recopy it if you want. Excel's kind of a pain. So if you copy something and then you accidentally click and start typing, it removes it from the keyboard. And so I'm just going to undo. You'd have to like reselect it and go through there. If you want to select faster and more, so let's say maybe I wanted column B and column D and column F, but I didn't want the middle. You can click on that column, then just hold Control or Command if you're a Mac. Click on D, click on G. Right now, I can copy just those three columns and I can move them to a new sheet. If I were to paste them, so I just copied them, Control C, but if I paste them right here, it puts them all right next to one another. So it only takes that data, which is really nice. And I'm going to undo to make it kind of clean. To select select maybe amount of data, you can hold shift and click. So I'm holding shift, and let's say I only wanted these first 25 observations, so I'll go to 2 to 26, and I just want that data. If I held shift, I'll highlight everything in between. And again, that is universal across the Microsoft platform. So that's in Word, that's in PowerPoint, that's in Excel, obviously. Which is really nice. So maybe I didn't want that, but I just wanted that. I'm just holding shift, but as soon as you click off, it's going to go away. Last piece is moving around in the data and selecting. So let's say I wanted to go all the way to the right and all the way to the bottom and highlight it all. I could click and drag, pretty easy. It can be kind of a pain if you have a lot. So I could click on the left, and then instead of just Control or just Shift, I'm going to hold them both. So I've again seen people think that you have to do these all three at the same time, but you do not, right? Just do the arrow key last. So just hold Control and Shift. They should be the bottom left part of your keyboard. And then go right, goes all the way to the right, and it's highlighted. So then I'm holding Control and Shift, and I'm using down. And it goes all the way to the bottom. And again, it's going to go all the way to the first blank in the far left one if you have them. If you want to go all the way to the bottom, you could just hold Control Shift again and go down, and technically it goes down to like 1 million plus observations, but I'll hold Control Shift and go up. Yeah, and so that's really nice. And maybe if I just wanted to like select, I hate having to scroll up. So one thing is please don't ever like manually scroll up. Like this is 5,000 observations, and see how long this is taking me just to do manually, which let me check here. Yeah, it's taking me forever. Please take advantage of these sliders on the bottom left and on the right. That's how I go up. Or honestly, what I typically will do is I'll either go here and I'll double click so I go to the top and it shows me a blank. I can go where I know there's no data and it'll always go up. Or I'll go to the bottom using control down, or if I'm at a bottom, I'll just do control up and it automatically takes me to the top. But you can do like maybe I only want these 3 columns, so I can do control or command shift and then right arrow key. And then if I wanted to go back one, I just hold shift and then I go left, 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 left. All right, so I only wanted those 3. So I could have clicked on company name and just done shift, right, right. And then if I want all the data with that, control or again command, shift, down arrow key, and it highlights it all. So just getting kind of comfortable moving. You'll see me do that kind of over and over. A lot of it's just practice. It does take a little bit of time to kind of go through it. Okay, something that's kind of out of order because it's actually more advanced, although it's really, really, really easy, is what we call text to columns. And so I'm going to go up to the very top. And note right now, I don't have city and state, but maybe that's something that I want for some reason. Like maybe I want to be able to look at just the certain states. And you're like, well, I could probably use the acronyms. Like, let's not do that. Like, I want to be able to get both of these. So I want to split this data. And it's nice because they're all in the same format. It's city, comma, state. So they're all like that. And so first off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over to the right side of the data, because if not, you kind of have to specify. So you need to insert as many blanks as you need to split, which wouldn't be that hard, but we don't need to do that right now. It will overwrite data, so you got to be careful. So I'm going to right click and cut. You could also do Control X or Command X. And then I'm going to right click and Control V, Command V, or just paste. And then I'm going to right click on column E, and I'm going to delete this column, and I'll shift it left. And so then what I'm going to do is I'm first going to click on the column H, and notice I know that it's split on that comma. It doesn't have to be a comma. So what I'm going to do here, and I go there, and then in the data tab, I believe, yes, you got this data tools. I might have more things than you because I play around with data quite a bit, but almost everyone is going to have this text to columns, and it tells you what it's going to do, but we're going to kind of just do it. So text to columns, and then delimited. So characters such as commas or tabs separate each field. Which is what we have, right? We know that it's split based on the comma. If it was fixed width for some reason, like you wanted to split it like first 6 letters, last 6 letters, you could do that. But we're going to do delimited. We have next. I think it auto defaults to there being a tab. You can do a semicolon, a comma, which is what we have, a space, or if it's something else like a number sign or something like that, you could do that. You could specify, but we have a comma. You could do multiple ones where it's got like you want to do multiple splits. This one's easy because it's just a comma, and you'll see below it's split it. So now it's saying without the comma, it's like, all right, here's what your data looks like. But if I do the comma, it's saying, okay, we're going to have city in one column, state in the next. You can either do next, and if there were things you're working with that are like dates, and that's more advanced on what we're doing, but you can, if you're working with stuff like that, specify, but you don't have to do it. It's just general. I haven't worked a lot with this outside of date, and you can change like how it's set up, but that's really nice if they just give you an actual date and you want the month, day, year, or something like that. Then you just do finish, voila, right? You have the city, you have the state, and I don't like that it didn't format the way I want it, but I can do that automatically pretty quick. And so then now you have it split. And again, let's see, I don't know if it'll undo. Yeah, it lets me undo it like that. And so I'll do here. Again, if you're kind of just practicing, I'll do data, text to columns, and delimited. I'll do next. It is a comma, and then I'll just do finish. I don't really understand why Massachusetts on that second one isn't getting shown. Let me do control down, troubleshoot, and that's the only one that's having problems. That's very, very weird. Don't really understand it because it doesn't usually delete anything. I'm going to undo, text to columns, delimited. It's right there. Yeah, I don't know. Oops. I'm just going to do. Always check, right? Whenever you do something, I guess that's kind of the rule. So I'm going to do finish, and then I'm going to cheat. I'm going to go copy and paste and put Massachusetts there. Interesting. Okay, so I like that, which is really, really nice. Then let's do some sorting and filtering. I have on here just to show basically what it is with the general company information sheet. So what if for some reason you wanted to see all the companies alphabetically, or you wanted the unique identifier to be smallest to largest? So one easy way to do it is you could click and select all your data, and then there's a bunch of places to do this from. I've always done either from the sort and filter on the home tab. I know on the data tab as well it has sort. I'm pretty sure you can right click, and there may be some sorting options, but I'm just going to do sort. It actually has some standard ones, like some quick ones, but I haven't told it what to sort on. So I could sort, and this looks a little bit different from a Mac and a PC. So on the Mac, you don't like have these like boxes. They're more like just like blank spaces that you need to like click on first to select. So what I'm going to do is first, if you have my data has headers, if that's not checked, note that this data does have headers. So I would check it. If not, it labels them just whatever the column is. And it'll treat like this as a like unique ID as like a number when in reality it's not. So the data has headers, and then the variable headers, the names kind of pop up, and I selected column J for some reason, and it did that. But then you can kind of tell it, well, okay, I want them alphabetical, so company name, A to Z. If it's a numeric variable like unique identifier, it'll change from like smallest to largest. So I'll do something like smallest to largest, hit okay, and now all the data is sorted. One thing to be careful with, if you're ever working with data, please don't sort one column, right? Because if you sort this, it's not going to match up with all its other information. And usually if you click this, Excel is going to be like, whoa, like be careful there. And it'll say like, yeah, you should expand the selection. The nice thing about this that you can't do with the next piece as easy is, what if you wanted to sort by city and then state, or like first name and then last name, something like that? What you can do is you can add a level. And you can do like 5 levels. So I could do first, well, I want to first sort by state, and then I want to sort by city, right? Something like that, and we'll do okay. And then all of Alabama is first, and then it's alphabetical within that, which is really, really nice and really, really cool. Really what I work more with is, instead of sorting, because I have to do that manually all the time, I actually use filters a lot. And I use them so much that I know the keyboard shortcut being Control-Shift-L, but just make sure you're clicked on the top part of your data, any of these headers. And if you click the filter button, these little tiny arrows pop up, and they look a little bit different on Macs and PCs. But what you do is first it groups all of your data together, but then you can click on the drop down and do a lot of things. So you can do within this, sort smallest to largest, and then it'll sort the data for us. The note that you can't do the different levels here. Technically with conditional formatting, you can later do it by there. You can also search within this. Again, this looks a little bit different on a Mac and a PC, but the functionality is exactly the same. So a lot of times I'll actually use filters to figure out like how many categories I have. Like, so here, like maybe I only wanted to see a particular store. Like, let's see, Zeus sounds like a good one. So I would just type Zeus and hit enter, and then it will only show me that company. And note, all that other data is back behind there. It's just like, well, that's all you wanted to look at. So you can clear that filter by just coming back and hitting select all and do okay, which is really, really nice. It is good. It's there. If you ever wanted to just like, maybe I only wanted data on Arizona or something like that, I could click select all, and then I'll just select Arizona, hit okay. And now I have only the Arizona data, which you could do also with a pivot table, but it doesn't really matter. And so that's really, really nice. Just make sure you clear your filters each time before you kind of go back and like moving and copy and pasting, so that you go in here. You can do multiple filters. Like I could do Arizona. Oh, come on, get back Arizona. And then I could do, well, I only want to see, I don't know, Gilbert and Phoenix for some reason. You could do something like that. But again, note when you have things filtered, it will basically say like, hey, there's a filter on, and there's no other filters. And then this says, well, we're also doing smallest to largest, which I think I can turn that off, but I guess it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to clear these. You can just turn the filters off, and everything goes back to normal. I like to have them kind of on each time that I'm working with them, which is really nice. Okay, so what's next? Let's do freezing pain. So again, this is just kind of best practices. If you're working with a lot of data and you get kind of down over here, sometimes like it makes intuitive sense like what these are. So let's go to financial information. But if I go down here and I get like stuck, I'm like, what was this variable? I can't remember. Well, damn, I got to go all the way to the top and think about it there. So you can make sure you kind of freeze the view. It's called freezing panes. I believe it's on the, I think it's on the view tab. Yeah, so again, this is going to look a little bit different for Macs and PCs, but the concept is the same. The two standard ones are if you can do the freeze panes. And so this is the one where it's going to freeze and has this little picture. Everything to the left and the right, or sorry, everything down and to the right of where your cursor is at. So I think this is probably the least intuitive one, but like if I was clicked here and I did freeze panes here, basically it's going to lock everything to the left and above it. So like I scroll down and notice it keeps my identifiers up here. If I were to scroll right, it keeps that first column over there, which makes it pretty nice. So what most people do is if then I just did undo. I'll go back to financial information. Let's see, I'll do freeze panes and then unfreeze panes. Most people, honestly, like what I typically do is I will go to the top left and then do freeze panes. And then, what's going on here? I didn't want to do that. Unfreeze panes. Clicked here, down and to the right, so freeze panes. Huh, it freezes up very high on this one, which it's not supposed to do. Z, Control Z, I did the undo. Sorry, it doesn't work on this. So unfreeze panes. Maybe I'll do top left, freeze panes. Yeah, so if I did that one, then I'll go down, and then if I go to the right, it doesn't freeze anything. And so what I probably should do is go here, unfreeze the panes, and then I'll go here. If I want to keep everything to the left and above it, I'll do freeze panes and then I can go down and to the right, and those stay hidden. If the left variable doesn't really matter to you, you can unfreeze the panes, and you always have freeze top row, freeze first column, something like that. And again, like you saw me make that mistake, like if I haven't used this in a while, I have to think about it. That's perfectly fine. There are a lot of commands I don't know that I have to go through, and I know I'm working to learn tables more effectively, and I'm still not great with those. So like you can do freeze top row. Just make sure you're looking at what you want to be frozen. So a lot of times what I've done is I'll be down here. I'm like, oh, I should freeze the panes, and I freeze the top row, and then I go down. I'm like, ah, man, so it freezes the top thing that you're looking at, which can be really frustrating because it won't let me go up in my data anymore above row 34 where I did that. So I've got to unfreeze it to do that. So make sure you're kind of looking at that row. Okay, so we're probably a little maybe past halfway through. So let's use Excel as a calculator as we kind of go through here. Again, at its simplest piece, it is a calculator. Like you can do basic math. So I could do like equals. That's the big thing is if you want to turn it into a calculator, I shouldn't skip that step. Just click in a cell and just do equals. And that automatically says, it tells Excel like, all right, I'm in math or command mode. I'm about to be like doing math for me. And you can do things like 5 plus 7 and it will do the math for you. So like sometimes if my brain's not working, I'll do something simple like that. But you can also do like basic commands where you kind of reference different cells. And so another way to like do that, and there'd be no reason to ever do this, but unless you're like in my stats class, like equals, so square root, so SQRT, so it's a command, and you just double click and you could type a number like what's the square root of 100, and hopefully this thing gives me a 10, and make sure you close the parenthesis and hit enter, and it does it. You could also do it where as long as it's a number, and Excel is telling me, hey, you better put in a number there, You click on this, and again, now it's going to do the reference. So it's saying, give me the square root of f2, of whatever that is. And it has to be a number or else it's going to yell at you. And then it does it for you, which is really, really nice. What we're going to use it for is we're going to create a variable called growth percentage. So right now, a lot of the data you're working with, so this is technically already in a percent, but I can't show it in a nice way, and which is what I kind of want to do. So if I clicked on that column and I did home, and I went to the number format, and I'm like, well, this is a percent, and I want to show it that way, and I clicked it, note that it multiplies it by 100. So if something is in a percent format, it has to be sort of in that, like where we know like the decimal is not too over. And so we can easily create that. So I'm going to insert a column by right clicking and then scroll down, hit insert. And then I'm going to click in this cell and I'm just going to type. So I'm going to type growth and then percent. And then, well, what do I need to do? Well, I need to take this number and divide it by 100. So I'm going to do equals. Right? We're going to do some math. You could manually type that 5,000 times, right? Type the number, divide by 100, type that. Please don't ever do that. Most of the things I've learned in Excel, I've done something very tedious. And I was like, there's got to be a faster way to do this. Like, there has to be, right? There's no way like I would have to do this in that long of a way. And there is, like most of the time there is. So for us, I'm just going to click on this and then that number divided by 100. And I'll hit enter. And then you're thinking like, well, damn, I'm still going to have to do that 5,000 times. And even if you did that, that would be an improvement because you don't have to type it manually and then you make a human error, right? We're trying to always reduce human error. But what we can do is as long as you're writing a formula that references a cell next to other data, it doesn't actually have to be next to the data that you reference. Excel knows that I bet you want to do that a lot. And so what most people do is they'll go over to this bottom right corner, and again, note that my cursor changes. It's now a completely black cross. You can click and drag, right? This is why you need a mouse if you're on a trackpad. Sorry, my brain froze there. You can drag and note that it's doing it. And you can always be like, well, is it working? Well, you double click and it's saying, well, take that number divided by 100. I never drag because usually I'm working with thousands of observations. What you can do is, again, go to the cursor and instead of clicking and dragging, double click. And then it goes to the very bottom or the first blank. And I know there's no data and I'm just scrolling down like, look, it did that formula over there. And now if I want to display it in a nice, clean fashion, I can represent it as a percent. Well, now I can do percent. And you can show it again however you want. So it's automatically set to round to 0 decimals. And maybe I want more than that. So even though it's rounded, if I were to do any math with this, it would use the exact number. So you'll see me, if you have my class, I always reference still rather than type. But you can click on this, and then let's say, I want 2 decimals. So I'll click, and I'll say, all right, show me 2 decimals. And they can do it. So this just looks a lot cleaner. Honestly, a lot of people don't like to center their data. I do like to center my data. So I'll do something like this, and then center. Some people don't like that, but I like to do it, and it's kind of up to you. You do have to be careful in terms of like moving formula. So if you wanted just this number and you copied and then pasted it over here for some reason, you're like, what happened? Well, it moved the formula, not the cell, and it referenced where you're at. So like this was referencing the cell to the left, and now it's referencing the cell to the left. If you want the number, what you have to do is, let me delete this, right? You can copy it and then you right click, or you can go up to the home tab and the drop, and then you see this little like values 1, 2, 3, or again, right click 1, 2, 3, right? I just want the values. And then it keeps the value. And honestly, that's a trick that I do is I know I'm never going to need this formula again. So what I honestly do is I'll click on the whole column. I will copy it, Control or Command C, right click, and then paste the values. And then all my values are in there, which is nice. I don't have to kind of worry about messing things up. So you always want to kind of be careful with that. Some other different commands. You can use like averages. So Excel is set up to do things like maybe I quickly wanted to see like average number of workers. I could do like equals average. So I start typing equals AV. And it gives me a list of these. And there's a bunch of different commands. So I love if commands. But if you just want the average, you can either click on it and double click, or you can type it. It's not case sensitive. So equals average, and then you have to open the parenthesis. Oops, open, not close. Open the parenthesis. And then it's kind of weird. It's like, well, click the number, comma, click the number, comma. But as long as it's highlighted, it will do it for you. So I'm going to click here. And then do you remember how to highlight everything from here to the bottom? Control and Shift, and then the arrow key. Or if you're on a Mac, Command and Shift. So Control, Shift, Command, Shift, down arrow key. And then it's got that whole range. All you have to do is hit enter. You could close the parenthesis if you wanted, but just hit enter, and then you go up. Right, there's the average number of workers, which is really nice. Let's do something cool. I'm going to copy these columns and paste them here and just say like, let's say I want the average for all of these. So equals average, and I like to just do the first and then double click. And so I'll do growth. So I'll click there, Control Shift down, hit enter. And you could do it a bunch of different times, but remember, if you move formulas, Excel just moves the reference number. And if I have the same number of everything, what I can do is, you could go old school or slow, copy, paste, copy, paste, copy. Oops, I messed it up. So copy, paste. And you always double check, right? So I double click, and that kind of opens up the formula. Double click, opens up. So I'm just like double checking. Something else you can do, so if I'm undoing, you could, right, go to the bottom right corner, the cursor changed, and just drag across, and it does it. You can't double click horizontally, so you got to just drag, but it does the formula for you. So that's really nice. There are other commands for like correlation. If commands are very, very popular. So like maybe I want to say like high revenue kind of firm or something like that. And so actually let's say like big firm. So big firm, we'll say like greater than 100. And again, it's completely arbitrary. I can use an if command. So you could manually do like, well, no, no, okay, and then keep doing that. But it's easier if you do an if command. And if I had to learn one command, it'd be an if. So it's just equals if, and it's just a logical statement. So I'll open the parenthesis, or you can double click. You're basically saying, all right, what's the test? Well, basically, I want to look at this number and see if it's greater than 100. All right, and then it says, okay, comma. So what do you want back if it's true? So if it's true, I want the word back, yes. All right, comma. If it's false, I want no. The problem is, if you just do this, I'm guessing it's going to cause some mistakes. You're like, why didn't it work? Well, Excel treats everything in the formula like a number, and yes and no are not a number. And so what you have to do is anytime you're working with words, you have to use the quotes. So I'm going to hold shift, and it's the key right next to enter for most of you all. And so I need it in quotes. That will treat this as text. And so no. All right, so no, and then I can double click, and then I always check it to make sure it worked. 130, yes, everything else was no. So then I'll do something. Oops, I don't want to do that. And make it look nice. And so I love if commands, and you can go all day on those. That's for more of an advanced training, but we can kind of go from there. Let's see. Okay, VH or Xlookup. So note that I have information that's different across two different sheets, and I didn't follow my own advice in terms of clearing my filters. So, excuse me. I'm gonna make sure I clear the filter. Clear this filter. But what I want to do is, what if I wanted information on both of these sheets, and I wanted them to match up? Well, note that they're not in the same order, and there are a lot of ways you could do this. If you were confident that you had the exact same things on the exact same sheets, an easy way to do this would just be to sort all your data by unique identifier and just copy and paste. It would work as long as you knew you had everything in this list that you had in this list. If you don't, then that's going to make life a lot harder. It's actually not that hard. There are three primary ways to do it. VLOOKUP. There's also what we call index match. And then there's a new command that's called Xlookup. The world loves VLOOKUP. I hate VLOOKUP because you have to, if you work in VLOOKUPs, you probably know. You're like, well, it's super useful, but I got to count, you got to highlight your data, you got to lock it. It's a huge pain. And so hopefully everyone watching this, you have the newest version of Microsoft, and this has been out for about a year now, and hopefully everyone has it. If not, you can do a quick YouTube tutorial, or you can just sort the data and match it. But I'm going to create a new sheet, and then I'm just going to rename it. So I'll rename this, like, I don't know, consolidated data, something like that. And so I know the unique identifier on each of the sheets is the unique identifier, like it will match. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this column, move it to the consolidated or whatever you want. And then over here in kind of our helpful things, what I want, so I want rank, industry, growth percent, and revenue moved over here. So I'll go over here. Let's see, what do I want? So I think this is rank. So I want rank, which is what I want. And then I want industry. So I have industry, I have rank. They're both on here. And then let me see what else we want. We need growth. Those are the other ones. So these I can just hold control or command, click on column D, click on column, hold control or command, hit G, copy, go over to consolidated, paste. I know those will line up. I could not do that on the financial information because they're in a different order. Again, I could sort them and then do that. If we're going to kind of stress for time, we could do that. But this is a recording, so I can do kind of whatever I want. We have a little bit more time. So on the consolidated sheet, I'm going to go ahead and at least line up what I want. And again, this like thing is in my way, so I'm going to hit escape and it goes away, which is really nice. And so what else do I need? So I need growth percent, and revenue. So I'm going to cheat. I'm going to go growth percent, revenue. I also want workers. So I'm just going to copy these titles, and then I'll go to consolidated and paste them. That way I know what I want. And so then, again, this takes a little bit of practice. So I'm just going to do equals X, and you should see something that says Xlookup. And it will walk us through this. So Excel, if you take your time to think about it, it does kind of hopefully make a little bit of sense. So I'll do Xlookup, and then lookup value. Okay, what do I want to look up? So I want to look up this unique ID, comma. Okay, well, where do you want to look it up at? Well, I want to find that one unique identifier on the financial sheet in column A. All right, so okay, that's what I want. All right, so it's somewhere in there. So it's looking for that first number in column A over here somewhere, and then comma. And well, okay, well, what do you want back if I were to find it in there? Like what column? Well, I want, because I'm in the growth column, I want the growth back. So I'm just going to click on column D. And then the other things are optional. So anytime you see in a command something in brackets, it means you don't really have to do it. And with this data, it's simple. I know that we have matches and stuff like that, but if maybe there weren't a match, you could specify like no match or something like that. But then you're done. Hit enter. All right, and it found it. And the nice thing is, right, no counting or anything like that. I now have that for everyone. I can just double click it down, right? And I double check, looking for that number on the financial information tab somewhere in column A, excuse me, and then gives me back what's in column D. Very, very nice. So we just have to do this 3 more times. There's more advanced ways where I could lock things, but I think this is just practice. So equals Xlookup, I double click. So I want to find again this unique identifier, comma, on the financial information sheet in column A, comma, now I want back, right, E, right, enter. Okay, I found it and got it. And you can go check, right? You can check these numbers. So let's go find unique identifier 1. So I'm going to go into column A, and then you can search. Most of the time it's up here. I'm going to search for 1 and then the space and hit enter, and hopefully it'll find it. It did not. I'm going to search 1. This is searching on the internet, which is not what I want. So I'm going to do, let's just go ahead and sort it to make our life a little bit easier. Data sort by unique identifier, smallest to largest, and we can check 81.44593. And then it doesn't bring the formatting, so we can change this to, again, do here, do percent if we want, and all right, and it matches, which is really nice. And so to save us a little bit of time, if you want, you can just copy and paste these columns over, but what trick I would do is I will double click in here, and I know the only thing that's changing is I'm going from E to F, and then from later on from F to G. So what I can do is I can select all of this and copy, and then hit escape, and then I'll go here and I'll paste. All right, and if I'm not careful, it'll treat it like Word, so I need to do undo. I'll double click, and so I can either type in here, or I like to go to the command bar. That's why I like to make this a little bit bigger. And I'll paste, and then I can just change this E to an F. All right, make sure you don't click and stuff in there because it's going to make life a little bit harder. And then I'll go here and paste, and then I know this was bringing back column G. And if you want to just take the time to practice, you can. Okay, and then I'll double click, and then again, I want this as a currency. That was just super nice. Yeah, and now let's do the most basic way, and these are the things that we'll bring into the final report when we kind of go through it and do it. And there are a lot of ways to do this, but let's at least introduce you to what we call a pivot table. So it's an easy way, and I'm quoting here, easy. It takes a little bit of time to learn. It's perfectly fine. But it's an easy way to get some statistics really easy from a lot of data, or look at a bunch of different things. So in the basic pivot table, I have on the kind of cheat sheet for you. I want to display it by industry. That displays count, average growth percent, average revenue, and average number of workers. And so what I can do is, first, I always select all my data. This is where you could click and drag. You could click on the top left. If you have a slower computer, though, it reads these as blanks, especially towards the bottom. So what I typically do is I'll go here and I'll do Control-Shift right, Control-Shift down, or Command-Shift if you're a Mac and PC. So I've highlighted it all, just because then you don't have to hide blanks or anything. So then you do Insert, and then the top left should be Pivot Table. It has some recommendations that I haven't really used. But really what I do is I'll just click pivot table, and it's like table range. Well, I already selected this. And then where do you want it? So you could keep it on the same worksheet. I'm going to put it on a new worksheet just so we can kind of play around with it, but it's entirely up to you. If you wanted to keep it on this sheet, you could do existing worksheet, and then you click on here or something like that. I don't love that, so I'm going to do new worksheet. Okay, so we'll do okay. And then it comes and you're like, well, where'd everything go? Notice why you want to pay attention to your toolbar. Now there's a new one. It's called Pivot Table Analyze. There's also a design feature. And so again, a lot of this is just kind of playing around. It has a lot of our options. It has some filters. It has by rows and columns, and then the values. A lot of people see the box and they're like, ooh, I'll check the box, which it can work out. But we want to show a lot in this pivot table, probably more honestly than you typically would, which sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I like to click and drag because I want to think about what I want to show before I go through and show it. Okay, and so I'm looking at the cheat sheet that says create a pivot table by industry. Okay, so I want the industries in the row. So I'm going to click on industry and I'm going to drag it. I'm going to click it. I'm going to drag it. I'm going to drop it in rows, and then it has all of our industries here. Okay, well, what do I want with it? Well, I want a lot of things. I want the count, so number of observations. And so this one's kind of a hard one, but what I'm going to start with, I'm going to drag industry, and I'm going to drag it down to values, because that's the value I want to see. And then, ta-da, it's basically saying in the data, there were 453 advertising and marketing firms, 435 business products, things like that. And you can do some things here where you have the filter options and you can sort A to Z, which is really nice. It does get a little clunky later though. And then you can always relabel these. So I like in, so I'm going to do in, something like that. And in particular, I like to center things. Note that now if you get clicked off, sometimes your toolbar goes away. Okay, well that's scary. Some people will then click back in here and it will show up. Sometimes you don't. So if you click here, if that's not the case, you should see something over here that says pivot table analyze, and then say field list, because that's what that thing's called. All right, what else did we need? We needed I want average growth percent, average revenue, and average number of workers. Okay, so growth percent, I'm going to drag it to values. And for some reason, if it's numeric, it starts as a sum, so it's adding it all up. Well, I have different observations, so I clearly wouldn't want to sum it. And so what I'm going to do is this little drop down, I think it's like a little plus icon on the Macs. Theirs automatically pops up. For PC people, you've got to do value field settings. And then what you're going to do is average. There's a lot of different things. You can do a bunch of calculations and stuff with these things. If you get really advanced into it, you can watch some other tutorials that we have. But we don't need that. We just want the average, and we'll do okay. And same thing, I'll wait and I'll clean up everything else, but I have average growth. I want average revenue, and then I want the average number of workers. So I'm just making this a little bit easier. So make sure I'm getting everything right here. Yeah, so I'll do the drop down. I'm sure there's a way to change this to where it automatically starts as that, but I haven't figured it out just yet. So I want the average number of workers. So, and again, you can rephrase this, something like that. So average number, whoops. Excel does not have spell check. That's a nice thing. If you don't want your columns to be really, really wide, like if you don't want to double click or something like that, something you can do is, it's called wrap text. It will wrap it so it's more vertical. I've used this a little bit. You don't have to, but I found that it's easier if I don't want to display it a lot. And then, so I'm going to do 2 decimals for all of this. And you can do the same tricks that we had before. So I can click here and do like Control Shift to the right and down. And then I'm going to say, well, I want to round. Let's see, I'm going the wrong direction. No, I'm going the right direction. So I'll do something like this. It's 2 decimals. For workers, I probably want to do 0 decimals because I don't want to round to a half a human or something like that. Revenue is in dollars, so I would highlight it, select it as a number. Again, don't freak out. It's just not wide enough. Look at this, average number of revenue in the energy section, 186 million. And then this is a growth. Again, it is a percentage, so I'll do that. And I'll do percent, and again, maybe I'll round to 2 decimals. So a really easy way to like look at things. And you could think like all the ways that you could break this down. Like maybe I actually wanted to look at it by state and look at that kind of different thing. Like that's really, really nice. Like you could spend hours upon hours messing with pivot tables. So again, this is just meant to be an introduction to it. There's just a lot of ways to really make your life easier. And again, you can do all the formatting stuff if you want. I like, again, I don't know why I like the other kind of color. Someone showed me this and I've locked into it as we've gone through. So I'll do something like that. Yeah, let's see. Where else do we want to go? Oh, if you want to sort within a table, if you have it by the category, it's relatively easy. But let's say I wanted to sort on like highest average growth rate. Note that there's no filter or anything in here. What you have to do is, I believe you have to right click in here, and then what you're gonna do, actually I think you have to right click on the column. Let me make sure. Sort, and then smallest to largest or largest to smallest. So you can sort within it, and it does jump everything around, I believe. So I need to do here, sort. Largest to smallest, something like that. And later on, we're building visuals that might make a lot more sense to kind of do, which kind of leads us into the next thing. And you'd never know that. I wish they'd put the filters all the way in. That would make more sense, but they don't. It's conditional formatting. So conditional formatting is a really nice way, if you're color deficient like me, to actually use colors to identify. Like, there's a lot in this table. And maybe your boss, so the one that I've outlined is, well, let's identify the top and bottom 5 by growth percentage and revenue. And so you could sort this thing and like highlight it or something like that, but conditional formatting is really nice. So what we can do is, it's on the home tab. I'm going to select the data that I care about. So average revenue and growth, so revenue and growth percentage. So which one we do first? Let's do revenue first. So revenue, and I'll go down like this. I'll highlight this data. I don't want the grand total because that's obviously going to be the biggest. And then I'm going to do conditional formatting. And you have, again, 1,000 different options that you could set up here. We're going to do top and bottom rules. Again, you can do greater than numbers, less than numbers. It's up to you. But I like the top. And for some reason, it's like, oh, you can only do the top 10. Well, no, like it's going to let us mess with that. So we'll do top 10 items. And then it defaults to red, which I don't like. But I want to change this 10 to a 5. And then instead of red, well, let's do green. And you can do custom format. Like you can do like, where are the colors? I believe right here. Yeah, you can do like this color if you want, something like that. But I'll stick with the standard. So I'll do green fill with dark green text. Can I do green fill with anything else? No, I cannot. So I'll do, okay. So there's my top 5, which these are the top on here because I sorted them by that. So you're like, Doug, right? But I can also do the bottom 5 and they better be the bottom. Let's see, top and bottom. We'll do bottom 10. We'll do 5 instead, and we'll keep those red. And that kind of makes sense. Well, let's see if the average growth percentages are top 5 highest for the actual average number of revenue. And maybe they are, maybe they aren't. So I'm just going to click on this data. I'll use conditional formatting, highlight cells, top and bottom. So I'll do top 10, and then I want 5, and then I want green. So it looks like actually only one company or one industry, the energy sector, both has the highest average revenue and the highest average growth percentage, right? It's outside of that. What about, let's see if the bottom revenue companies are the ones that have also the bottom growth percentages. So conditional formatting, bottom, and I'm going to do bottom. Ooh, I did percent instead of rule. Sorry, conditional formatting, bottom 10 items, not bottom 10%. And again, we'll change this to 5 and do okay. Now it looks like actually only one sector overlap. So there's a lot of difference, which I think is really, really interesting. Note that you could actually add so pivot table. There are other things that you can do with again, you can take hour-long classes. They're like visuals that you can create from these. They're called pivot charts. I haven't found them to be the most user-friendly. Honestly, I visualize a lot of my data in Tableau, but we can at least start here because again, it's just utilizing it and we're going to weave it into the report later. But let's create some visuals here. First thing is I want a bar graph displaying growth percentage by industry, and I want it in ascending order. Okay, so generally when I'm making visuals, and maybe you all know something better than I do, but let's see, I'll rename this pivot table, and I'll just close this, and then I'm going to create a new sheet, and I'll call this the visuals. Let's say visuals. I like to get my data where it's supposed to be, like what do I want? So for this visual, I want a bar graph with growth percentage by industry. And so I'm gonna copy the industry. I don't want the grand total. I'm gonna copy it and then I'll paste it right here. And I'm gonna change the title to be industry because that's what it is. And then I'll go back to the pivot table and I want growth percentage. And I'm clicking and dragging. I should probably do Command Shift, things like that. Let's see here. I'm going to just move. So you can click and drag and move these things around. But I'll go to Visuals. And there's Excel. If I do something else, it stops the copy. Right, something like that. I can fit this. It's not as bad. And then, the conditional formatting won't impact the visual. What you can do is you select your data, and you don't actually have to select it first. But then you could do insert, and then you have all these charts. You could just say well, I want a bar graph, so I'll probably hover over the bar or column, which is perfectly fine. I typically will start with a recommended chart because Excel can be really smart. Well, that's what I want. And I honestly don't care if you have it horizontal or vertical. I know in the report I have it as a horizontal bar chart, so I'll click on the horizontal and I'll hit OK. And then I've got something like this. All right, well, that's not ascending, right? I want to see the biggest on the top and then the smallest on the bottom and go from that way. And note this thing's ugly. Some general best practices, never take a visual and drag it from either the side or the bottom because it distorts it, it pixelates it. What you can do is, if you're in, I'm undoing, If you're in Excel, it doesn't work, but you'll see this in PowerPoint. It'll let you go vertical, so I'm gonna do that and then undo. All right, so I think if you hold shift and then drag from the corner, note that it won't let you change the aspect ratio. So you're keeping it in the same like traditional like format that it's supposed to be displayed in. So I'll do that. And then it always displays just in the order that you have it. So the easy way to do it is just select your data. I'm going to do Control A to select all. And then I'll do data, sort, and I want to sort average growth. I want the largest to smallest. And then ta-da! For some reason, it flips it on the chart. So, well, all right, let's change the sort to do smallest to largest. And it's easy to see that the consumer products and services has the highest growth percentage. All right, and you can spend a lot of time on these, like to make it like, I don't know, you can set like the axis titles where you could just do industry and then growth percentage, like growth percentage, something like that. You can format the lines, like right click and say no line. You can set how these are displayed. Again, you can do like some filters and things like that, where you only show a select amount of them. There's a lot you can do. Again, that's a story for another time. I don't think you'd want the data table because it's super hideous, but for smaller ones, you can. You have some error bars. So a lot of different things that you can do, like to clean this up if you really want it. I don't like that it only uses the title. So I would like change this like by industry or something like that. All right, so one relatively easy kind of visual. The next one is going to be, let's see, a scatter plot of average number of workers on the x-axis versus average growth rate or growth percent on the y-axis. And so again, I like to kind of just think of like, what data do I need? So I need number of workers and average growth rate. So I'll do pivot table. So I'll do, I'm going to cheat. So I'll do these two, Control C or Command C, and then I'll paste them over here. And then what I want to do is I want to highlight these two and then delete and then shift the cells up and then it goes up. Actually, I could do it from the other way if I wanted. One thing you have to be careful of is if you just did it like this, so I'm going to click in this data, we'll do the shortcut, Control A. Again, I don't want the totals, I believe. Yes, I'm going to delete these because I just want to be careful. I'll shift them up, it doesn't really matter. But I'll here, Control or Command Shift up. Remember that I wanted workers on the x-axis. So if I do insert, and again, I could do recommended charts. Right now it's flipped, and honestly, it's not very easy to fix in the actual visual. So what I'm going to do is I always have just learned that anything on the horizontal axis needs to be on the left. Anything on the vertical axis needs to be on the right. And again, the conditional formatting is not going to matter. So I'll do Control A, and then I'll do a recommended chart. The scatter plot's there. Note that it's also going to be right here. It gives you the same thing. All right, so again, I would relabel this average growth percentage versus average number of workers. So just looking if there's like, oops, sorry, a quick zoom in there. Average number of workers seems to be related to the growth percentage. And it doesn't look like there's super one. Again, I would clean this up. I would spend a lot of time sort of best practices like clicking on the different like lines. I don't think you need them. Again, I like to always make sure I label the axes. So I would say something like average number of workers, and this one's going to be average growth percent. And again, this is for each industry. So like you could actually do this for like each data point. Honestly, I probably would do that, but I just wanted to show you from here. And then I'll do plus, and then I'm a stats person, so I like to add in the trend line just to kind of see, because everyone likes to look at data and like, I see a pattern. You can add a bunch of different types if you get more advanced, but there's a bunch of different options where you can show up and do that, but you don't have to. You can display the equation on the chart. You can display the R squared. So if you're a stats person, it's really nice, but if you're not a stats person, it doesn't really matter. You don't really need it. Yeah, and so then the last one will be, let's see, a pie chart for industry and the number of firms. So hopefully you're kind of at this point where it's pretty easy. So now I want the industry, which I actually already have over, so I'm going to cheat. I'm going to do my last one. I'll do industry, copy, and then I'll paste this. And then I need the number of workers. So here, or average number of, so I need number of firms I need in. So I'm going to copy this and visuals, paste here, and gotta delete these, burn it, delete, shift cells up. Sorry, I'm moving fast. I don't want to take up too much of your all's time. Okay. And I like to use clear titles. So I would say like number of firms, something like that. And again, this probably isn't the best visual representation of this. I probably would actually use a bar graph. So I'll do Control or Command A and then insert. I'm just trying to show you all the different things that you can do. So you could go to recommended charts. I think actually bar charts would make the most sense. I don't know what this is. I'll go to all charts and it gives you sort of these different ones, which can be pretty nice. I just kind of showed you, so let's see what a sunburst kind of looks like. This one actually may be better than a pie graph because it's kind of a little easier to see, although the things aren't there as well. So we'll go with a pie chart. You can get fancy and do 3D and stuff like that. They've gotten better, but they're still not that great. We'll do okay. Then I'm going to move it over. Right, oops. See, again, another thing with pictures, if you randomly click and drag, it moves the picture. So I'll do this, copy paste. I'll say number of firms by industry. And again, I'm going to drag from the quarter. In Excel, I have to also hold shift and then do it just to keep it kind of set up. So I don't know, something like this where it may be a little bit easier. There's no real easy way to show this. You could do something like the data labels. Maybe that'll make it a little bit easier. It's kind of up to you. Like you don't have to show the legend, but how am I supposed to know? Again, that's why I like Tableau. Oh, nice. I put it on the side this time, which is a little bit nicer. But I know there's a lot that you can do and kind of play around with it, but tons of different visuals. Yeah, and so we'll incorporate these into, and I've done another one. I've already put it in there for the shell. We'll do a bunch of like these. We'll put them in reports later. Again, kind of best practices stuff is just to kind of think about like, how can I make this look nicer? Like this, maybe I want to click on that, right click and do like format axis. And you can tell it like, well, what do I want the units to be? Like, how do I set that up? And you can also change like the ratios, the alignment and stuff like that. So this is honestly what happens kind of behind the scenes that makes things look a little bit easier. And so I'd probably change this to 0 decimals. And you have to click off to kind of see it. Note that Max, it's a little bit different and you can kind of get wonky if you get kind of clicked off. It's always okay to just click X and then click on an axis. Like where you click is very important in terms of what you can do. So I always know like if I want to format an axis, I should click on it first and make sure it's kind of highlighted. Things like that. So I hope this was useful. Again, I probably threw 2 years worth of Excel at you here in a little bit over an hour. Don't stress. Again, a lot of this is just meant to show you what is possible. So a lot of times I'll see something like, I remember that I can do this, but I don't remember how. And then I just hop on Google and I kind of figure it out. Like I want to like highlight the top 10. It's like, oh, using conditional formatting, you can do that really easy. And it makes my life a lot easier. So a lot of this is just to show you like, hey, these things exist. And it's a skill, right? It has to be practiced. You have to keep doing it. If you just do this and walk away and don't see it for a year, well, of course you're going to forget it. So if you're using it kind of all the time, it can make life a lot easier. For kind of the bonus piece for if you're taking stats, you need to have a data analysis tool pack. So this is different for the Macs and PCs. So I'll do the PC first because it's the longest. So you'll go to File, you'll go to Options, and you'll go to Add-ins. Oh, come on. My computer's going slow. Down at the very bottom, it says Manage. Well, okay, Manage, Excel Add-ins, just hit Go. And then you should check this box and for Analysis Tool Pack, hit OK, and it'll show up. For Macs, it's a lot easier. You got a toolbar, your top toolbar, because you have 2 toolbars, Should be something like tools, and at the very bottom it says Excel add-ins, and you just hover over and it's going to say, do you want the tool pack? And you just select yes. And just to make sure you have it in there, there's a new thing that says analyze data in Excel. We don't want that. It's getting smarter, a little bit of AI in there, but it's still not smart. And this will let us do a bunch of testing, calculate a bunch of different tests or get descriptive statistics, things like that as we kind of go through. Okay, so I hope this was useful. Take a little break, and then we'll talk about how to work hopefully more effectively in Word, and we'll leverage some of these visuals.